I'm on my way to interview an owner of an interesting car. I'm just on my way to interview Ray about his Model T Ford. Now, I know nothing about Model T Ford, so that should make it for an interesting interview. Now, he lives about 20 minutes down this road, which is just outside Bathurst in New South Wales, Australia. So, I'll see you when I get there. I'm here talking with Raymond, or Ray, about this wonderful, wonderful old Model T Ford. Now, this is way outside my comfort zone here, but we'll start with, let's talk about the mechanical specs of this thing, because I know nothing. So, what's the engine?
4-cylinder.
Right.
Square. It's basically a square engine in as much as the compression, or the compression and the stroke are basically the same.
Right, yeah, yeah.
It's just it.
So
if
it's
you
like
put
a
your
flat head?
yeah,
Like
side valve, flat head. If you
Yep.
put your finger on the spark plug hole and it blows you off, blows your finger off, you've got enough compression to run.
Yep,
If
yep.
it doesn't blow your finger off, then you've got a problem.
So is that lower compression engine?
Oh, it's only about 20 to 1.
Right,
It's not very much.
yeah, yeah.
It's supposed to be 22 horsepower, but it's only, you get 20 horsepower out of it.
Right,
It will still pull 80 to 90 kilometres an hour.
yeah.
There's no way to stop it.
So what's the sparking arrangement?
The
How's that?
sparking, well, you can either run coils
Right.
with a battery. That one ran on magneto.
So in the day when it was made,
It had you needed a torch battery about that big.
right,
The old telephone batteries.
yeah,
Put that in, get your ignition, crank it over, and then switch over to magneto, and it'll just run on magneto from then on.
so the magneto's like
The
a
magneto's-
generator type thing.
It's like a generator built into the flywheel.
Right.
There's magnets on the flywheel with a bobbin plate behind it, and the magnets are creating the power
Right,
as going around. Well, it was all DC, and it could go from 5 volt to 36 volt. There was no real way to control it.
and there's a bit of punch in that if you go touching the wrong thing, isn't there?
Yes, well, I've had it up to 30,000 volts going through the coil, which nearly killed the person that
That's
touched
probably
it.
going to set you back in the seat, wouldn't it?
Yeah, but
Yeah.
normally there's about 12,000 volts going through the spark plugs.
Right. Now that's got no fuel pump. It's a gravity feed arrangement.
Gravity feed underneath the driver's seat.
Under the driver's seat.
Yeah,
Didn't one of them have the fuel tank in the dashboard somewhere?
that was the 26, 27 model.
Okay,
That's the modern version.
that's the mod.
Now this one's underneath the seat. It's 8 gallons.
So there's not much gravity height between them, is there?
No.
No.
And
Okay.
if you're going up
So
a hill,
if you're going up a hill or something.
you've got to go up backwards.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
If the engine gets higher than the tank,
Yeah.
you're in deep trouble. So you turn around, you go up backwards. Till you get to the top, and then turn around and go on again. If you know you're going to do hills, keep it full.
Yeah. So now also the transmission arrangement is a bit of an art form. How does that all work?
Well, everything you've ever learned about driving a car, you have to forget and start again. And your transmission you've got 3 pedals.
Right.
You've got your clutch pedal, which is your neutral, in a straight, or if you push it in, right down, you're in low gear, half up, you're in neutral, right out, you're in top gear.
Right.
The next pedal in is your brake pedal, and with that, the next one along is your brake, and it's a band on a drum in the transmission, and your next pedal is your reverse.
Now the brake pedal, is that a bit of a misnomer from a name standpoint? It slows down, does it?
It's a slowing process.
Yeah.
If you slam it on, you might just drop 5 or 10 kilometres an hour, and that's about it.
Now the reverse thing, so is it, in modern terms, is this like an automatic gearbox, or?
It's a foot-operated automatic.
So yeah, so.
If you want reverse, you push your clutch pedal half in,
Yep.
and then push the reverse pedal in,
Yep.
and you go backwards.
Right. Okay.
And the problem is, if you ever break a pinion, and you put your foot on the brake pedal to stop the car, well, you won't stop anyway, but it stops the engine. And the handbrake, you can lock your wheels up, but you've only got about 4 square inches of rubber on the road,
Yeah. Yeah.
because those tyres are pumped up to 60 pound per square inch,
Really. Yeah.
and they're only 3 inches wide,
Yeah. Yeah.
so
There's not a lot of grip.
no grip at all.
Right.
A wet road, you drive to conditions.
Yeah. 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 So you've owned this a very long time.
I've owned it since 1965.
Right. So, but nevertheless, 90% of the time you're driving a car, an ordinary car. So, is it just like second nature for you now to get in that and dance?
Oh yeah.
Because it is a bit of a dance, isn't it?
The ideal driver would be an octopus. You've got 3 pedals on the floor. You've got your advance and retard up on your steering column.
Yeah.
You've got your handbrake beside you. And that one has an accessory diff fitted with a split diff, sort of like the old Eden.
Oh, like the old trucks.
Like the old Eden truck diffs.
Yeah, yeah.
You can actually split the ratio, and it's called a Ruxtor.
Yeah.
And it should be a lever in the middle of the floor, but I couldn't get in. I was cramped, so I put the lever beside my handbrake lever.
Right.
So you've got 2 levers on the floor, 3 pedals on the floor, advance and retard steering column, and no one, if you stick your arm out, no one knows what a hand signal is.
So the retarding and advancing on a modern car, well, on my car it's done by vacuum, but on a modern car it's done by computer, I think. So you've actually got to do that.
I've got my biggest gauge and only gauge on the whole car is the thermometer stuck in the radiator.
Right.
And it's called a motor meter. And you watch that, and if you can just see the red line in the middle of the hole of the little circle,
Right.
as long as it stays there, it'll run all day, all night, and no problem.
Yeah.
If it starts to go up, then you either advance it a bit more, or you retard it depending on what you're doing.
Yeah.
Up or down on the fuel,
Yeah.
and you've got a mixture screw there. You can actually adjust your carburetor while you're going. But normally, once you get it running, you leave it set. You don't touch it, because the more things you touch is the more things that can go wrong.
Yeah. Yeah. So from a suspension standpoint, I'm seeing a transfer
Transverse
leaf
springs.
spring. Is that the same at the back?
Yes.
My goodness. And it's a solid
Solid
axle.
chassis. The axle and drive shaft housing are all one,
Yeah.
and they're attached straight to the back of the engine. And there's a large drive shaft inside
Right.
with a pinion on the end that brakes quite easily.
Right. So it's got a diff.
It has got a diff, but
Yeah.
that one's got more of a diff than most because of the 2-speed action in it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Mainly because there's a lot of hills around, and I need to be able to split a gear to go up and down the hills.
Yeah. Yeah.
Otherwise, if I'd lose me revs about halfway up.
Yeah.
I'm in low gear, more revs, and I'm struggling. With this one, I go into the hill at a bit of speed,
Yeah.
pull it straight back into second gear, and keep it going. And most of the times, I can get over the hills with no problem.
Right. My goodness. Yep.
But you've got to, if anything that you can drive in a modern car, you've got to completely forget and learn again.
Yeah. Learn again. Yeah.
But if I can get out of a left-hand drive to a right-hand drive into that, it's all the same.
All second nature by now. Yeah.
I've been doing it for too long.
So how long have you had this one?
I got it in 1965. And the only reason I got it, 1966, but I'd heard of it in 1965. And the only way I found out about it was I used to go out to my uncle's property out at Wattle Flat. And I'd spend weekends out there and my holidays. And I was an apprentice, so I spent a lot of time out there working. The old uncle said, you know, there's an old car here. If you can find it, you can have it. And I thought, that's brilliant. And I searched for a year and a half and I couldn't find it.
Yeah.
And one day we all had a big family get together out there, and one of the old aunties said to me, "What do you do to keep yourself occupied?" And I said, "Well, old uncle here said there's an old Model T in there. If I could find it, you could have it." And she said, "That miserable old bugger. He knew we took that away in 1927. He's just getting you to repair everything and clean his place up." And I went, "Oh, thanks a lot." She said, "But if you come over to my place, over at Mount Horrible, you can have it."
Yeah.
So there we go again. So the following weekend we drove over to Mount Horrible, and I was the biggest blackberry bush I'd ever seen. I mean, the biggest.
Yeah.
The whole shed was covered and the house was covered. And she said, "It's inside there." And we go, "Oh my God." I said, "All right." So I got all the ideas. We came back home. The following weekend I got a friend, Graham Anderson from the Narrabri Club, and him and I went up and we cut passageways into the blackberry bush.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
We found a 1920 Grasshopper Chev. We found a 1920, about 22, 23 Hupmobile. We found the remains of a 43 Harley Davidson. The remains of about an 1899, 1900 Holzman buggy. And the Model T was there, but it was in pieces. So Graham said, "Well, I want the Hupmobile." I said, "Well, you can have the Hupmobile. I'll take the motorbike and all the Model T's mine." He said, "What about the Chev?" I said, "Just tow it out. We don't want that."
Yeah.
And I believe it's still sitting there to this day.
So
And
how
then-
many scratches and wounds did you get from that bush?
None.
None?
We never got any. We just cut a passageways in.
Yeah, yeah.
The locals came down with tractors to help us pull all the stuff out. And I found the cylinder head 6 foot off the ground. The diff was underneath a super spreader that they'd made. The front axle was under a box trailer and bent and bolted. The engine was on a saw bench. The windscreens off it were used as windows in the shed. The running boards were shelving. The wheels were gone. The timber had rotted. And there was bits of mechanical stuff laying around. And I thought, well, I wonder where the body is. So we cut deeper until we got to the house. And lo and behold, there's the body made into lounge chairs on the front veranda of the house. The two side lights, one up on either side of the front door. The two headlights, one was in the bathroom as a soap holder, and the other one was a fruit bowl in the kitchen. So we got the bodies, and we got about 80% of the car.
Yeah, yeah. Now this was 1966.
Round 66, yeah.
When did it turn a wheel under its own power after that period?
Well, I would say late 70s.
Yeah.
In that time, I built 3 other Model Ts, one for myself and 2 for other people.
Yeah, yeah.
And I kept going back to it because we always reckoned the car was haunted.
Yeah, yeah.
It was a really evil vehicle. And we kept going back to it, and we'd work on it. And it just never felt right, and the hair on your arms used to stand up.
Yeah, yeah.
And I did the motor up, and I'd get about 2 minutes running or about a mile's worth of running out of it, and the motor would crack. So the original motor's sitting over there underneath the shelf, never to run again.
Yeah.
I gave up on the 3rd attempt because it was costing me $1,000 a time to get the engine fixed.
Yeah.
So yeah, I did that, and we just slowly put it together. And then one of the TAFE teachers from St George came down and helped me getting it going.
Yeah.
And I got the body rebuilt in Canberra, and we took it down through Wollongong TAFE, and they spray painted it down there. And then I paid a trimmer, and by 1982 it was on the road.
So since 1982, I know you've been all over the place in it. So where have you been?
82 was the first trip we did, and that was to Parkes. And most of us had never driven Model Ts past Penrith.
Yep, yep.
So here's all the club driving to Parkes for the first Model T International Rally in Australia.
Yeah.
We had people from England, America, New Zealand, Guys drove their Model Ts up from Victoria and down from Queensland, and we all got together in parks.
Yeah.
And the day we came on our way up, we all got to Mount Victoria.
Well, that would
And,
be a
and
challenge.
everybody's sitting looking over and down the road, and we're going, how the hell are we going to do this? And one guy said to his wife, well, you go down in the modern car and I'll go down in the Model T and I'll catch you on the other side, just in case I lose it. None of us had ever been up and down Mount Victoria.
Yeah.
Anyway, we drove down and we drove out. Then after it was all over, we realised it was quicker to go across the Darling Causeway and straight down into Lithgow.
Yeah.
It's one down and that's it, not
Yeah.
one down, one up.
Yeah.
Anyway, we drove all through the parks, and that was the first big tour, and we had a hell of a time.
Yeah.
And then from then, the next one was we did another rally down to Griffith, and all around there, and then we decided we'd start doing a few other more runs, and in that time there was the Flying Dr. Bash came up.
Right.
So we decided, well, let's all enter. So 28 of us entered the Flying Dr. Bash from
Right.
Adelaide to Alice Springs, which is 1,500 k up the South Road.
Yeah.
So we all entered, and it was an eye-opener.
Yeah.
That car made it all the way through with one flat tyre
Yeah.
at Ayers Rock. We had a petrol truck following us because we can only go 180 k and we're finished.
Yeah.
And driving across up the South Road heading towards Cooper Pedy, we learnt about the curvature of the earth, because you're sitting there and you could actually see the earth was like that in front of you.
Yeah.
And the road trains would pull over for us. We had a wow of a time.
So, corrugations?
Annoying.
How did it handle them?
Annoying.
Yeah.
Bouncing around a fair bit. I found the best bit was to drive partially in the bull dust
Right.
and drive in the centre of the road.
Yeah.
And I got a smoother ride, or just go slow.
Right.
And the road out to Ayers Rock was tarred, so it wasn't a problem.
No.
We played rallycross at Cooper Pedy in amongst the mine shafts. We drove out to Ayers Rock, and then some of them said, well, we'll go out to the Olgas, and I went to the Olgas, and I said, well, I've still got nearly a full tank of gas. I can make it to Docker River.
Yeah.
So I'm heading on. So I headed off down the gun barrel.
Yeah.
And we got a fair way, and then in the end we ran out of time, so we turned around, came back. And the side benefit, or the underside benefit of that is when I brought the car back to Sydney, I gave the engine to the engine reconditioner, and he said, I've never seen such an engine and gearbox so worn out.
Yeah.
Have you been driving in sand pits?
Yeah.
I said, yeah.
Yeah.
Anyway, we went from there, and we drove up to Alice, loaded them on the GAN,
Yeah.
and brought them back to Adelaide, and then we drove home.
Yeah.
And I got the Overlander badge, which is on the car,
Yeah.
and they said to us, well, you've got to drive at least 500 kilometres to get the Overlander badge. And I said, well, we've just done 5,000 kilometres.
Yeah.
And they went, oh,
That covers it.
that covered it. And we raised somewhere around about $40,000 to $50,000.
That was well done.
And the government matched us dollar for dollar. And then we did the big rally around New South Wales, 9,000 kilometres around New South Wales in so many weeks.
Yeah. Now, okay. Some rally drivers, some car owners are not quite truthful when I ask them. Breakdowns. Let's talk about breakdowns. It's inevitable that it must have broken down at some point.
It's had some rippers.
But given the nature of it, have you been able to fix them?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So that's fix them on the side of the road sort of scenarios?
Yeah,
Or?
I've had some I can fix on the road. I've had three that one I made it back to where I had to and left it because it couldn't go any further.
Yep.
And I had two that we picked it up with a trailer and brought it home and pulled the diff out.
Yep.
I sheared the pinion on 3 occasions.
Yeah, okay. Yeah.
And no pinion, no go.
Yep.
I did one on the tour around New South Wales, and I did 2 on weddings. That's why I do not do weddings. Because I feel I'm letting the bride or the bridesmaids down.
Well, it gives them a story to tell later in life, you know.
But I drove 1,000 kilometres with a an intermittent bloody electrical connection,
Yeah,
backfiring and carrying on, and we found out I had too much paint between the chassis and the motor mounts.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
So the engine wouldn't earth out.
Earth probably. Oh, Earth. Don't talk about Earth. Yeah.
And over 1,500, around 1,200 to 1,500 kilometres, we got fed up, and we were trying to work on it, figure it out, and I moved the steering wheel and the car stopped.
Yeah.
So we started it and I moved it again and it stopped. And we realised that the engine was short-circuiting
Yeah.
through the carburetor control,
Yeah.
into the steering column, down to the chassis, and that
Yeah.
way. So we put a cable on it, and from the engine straight back to the battery, still on there. It's never missed a beat since.
There's only a couple of, well, about 3 or 4 mechanical things that have stumped me. And one of them was a car that was like a flat battery, which ultimately turned out to be an earth cable from the engine to the chassis. You know? The other one was a wasp nest in the exhaust, so the car wouldn't start.
Never had that problem.
It wasn't until we tried to clutch start it and drag it around a paddock, and it loosened up the wasp nest, and when we next tried it, there was this almighty bang, and this thing went flying across into the back of the shed.
Yeah, well, I've done 3 pinions in.
So that a weak area?
That is a weak area.
Yeah.
I've had trouble with the clutch, all the clutch plates for the automatic clutch plate.
Yeah.
That sort of killed us a bit. That was another bad one. I couldn't proceed.
Now, what about parts? Because I have a relatively modern Toyota. When I say relative, I mean it's 1990. When this is, what's this?
1913.
1913. So how do you
107,
go getting like anything from a piston to a clutch for the...
$110. Well, it's 110 years old. I've had a lot of good luck on clutches.
Yeah.
They've really. I bought a clutch back in the mid '80s called a Watts clutch in America, and I've driven on that most of my driving time in it.
Yeah.
And when we did the gearbox up and the engine up, about 3 years ago, we done it up for the first time in all that time.
Yeah.
And I don't change the oil, I just keep filling it up because the oil leaks out.
Yeah.
That's why I keep all the dust down on the roads.
Yeah.
And we look, the clutches were actually worn out. I'll show you after if you like what they look like. Anyway, they were worn out.
Yeah.
And the engineer that did it up said, well, where can we get this clutch? I said, I'll just ring up and buy one. And I rang around and I got onto the guy that used to make them, and he said they last the lifetime of the car, and no one had, once they bought one, they never wanted another.
Yeah, yeah.
I said, well, I want another. And he said, how far have you gone? And I said, I've got about 50 to 80,000 miles on the car.
Yeah, yeah.
And he said, oh, okay. Anyway, he said, I've got one left. And I said, well, I'd like to buy it. And he said, all right, you've got it. And then out of the blue, about 30 people came on the net and were trying to outbid me to buy the Watts clutch off him.
Yeah.
And I bought the last one in existence, which is in the car, and it'll outlast me and whoever else gets the car.
Yeah.
But
So what about things like, well, shock absorbers? Does it have?
what shock absorbers?
It doesn't have shock absorbers.
Doesn't have them.
What about gaskets? Consumable products. Like,
They're remaking gasket kits. You can buy all of that straight over the counter. A gasket kit, a head gasket will cost you about $100.
yeah. Well,
a
that's on
gasket,
par with a car, you know.
but they're not really good quality anymore.
What about tyres? I would have thought you wouldn't get them either.
Tyres, they were good. We used to. There was in the '60s, you could buy tyres made here.
Yeah.
Dunlop, Olympic. They actually made them here.
Yeah, yeah.
And then a company in the United States came over and bought the moulds.
Right.
Took them to California.
Yeah.
And we were buying tyres from California, and they were around about $50 a tyre, which in those days was expensive.
Yeah, yeah.
You bought 5 and put them away.
Yeah.
Well, then another company started up in Newcastle called Betco, and they were making a really good tyre, and they were about $80 to $90 a tyre.
Yeah.
And another company came over from America and bought all their moulds and said, we're going to keep the tyre production up, which they did for about 2 weeks, and put them away. So I went back to what tyres we could get out of America, And there was a company in Brazil making them,
yeah,
which were good rubber. They were actually good tyres.
yeah,
And then the company in the United States started buying them in Taiwan, had them made in Taiwan, had them made in Korea.
yeah,
They're now made in Vietnam.
yeah,
And if you want to buy a Firestone, Whitewall Firestone, it's about $500 or $600.
really,
If you want to buy just a standard T driver or T tyre, they're about $338. But it's the same rubber.
yeah.
You're paying for the name on the side.
Tyres are a funny thing, you know. On my old Triumph there, I've got some tyres called Federal tyres, made in Taiwan. They were about $80 each 4 years ago. They're cheap, made in Taiwan. I thought, well, it'll pass Rego and I'll try and find a better one. They are the best thing I've ever owned. You can drive in the wet and it's beautiful. So and before that, I had a really good name company tyre, and if you come to a set of traffic lights in the wet and you put your foot on the brake, it was, well, am I going to go sliding through the intersection?
Yeah, well, I've got tyres here made by Dunlop in the 1920s.
Yeah,
And they're still as subtle today,
yeah,
and they're still in the paper wrapping.
yeah,
1920s,
yeah,
and they're still as good today as the day they were made.
yeah,
I've got tyres made from the 1970s called T drivers. I've still got 2 of them in the rack, and I recently bought a set of Ward River tyres, and I was paying $250 a tyre, and now they've jumped. The importer's now charging me $330 a tyre,
yeah,
and he's still $80 cheaper than the tyre companies.
yeah.
But I bought 4 off him, and I've got them put away there,
Yeah.
and I doubt if I'll ever use them, but I've got them put away.
But at the end of the day, the gist of the situation is you can get
I can
enough
buy, yeah,
to keep this going.
I can buy tubes, tyres, and the inner liners over the counter,
Yeah,
and that is getting harder. Old world tyres at Mudgee's closed down and gone.
yeah,
These antique tyres in Melbourne. They've got branches everywhere, but it still comes from Melbourne.
yeah, yeah,
And there's another Model T supplier, Model A, Model T and hot rod supplier in Melbourne. And they have them, but theirs is all by mail order. You just can't walk in and pick them up.
Now, the next thing is, okay, mechanical mayhem. What about off-road excursions? In all the years you've owned it, has it digressed somewhere into a ditch? Or even worse, into the back of somebody else's car?
Never hit another car with it.
Yeah,
We played out there in the paddock, we played rallycross.
yeah, yeah.
I couldn't get the back wheels off. So we said, well, I'll tell you what we'll do. We'll take the wheel nut off, the axle nuts off.
Yeah, and then,
We put us right off about, we've got about 3/16 of an inch clearance.
yeah, yeah,
Split pin it, put a
Yep.
split pin in, and we went out there in the paddock. Peter Boland and myself, he's got a Model T and lives in Bathurst, and we played rallycross out there in the paddock all afternoon.
yeah, yeah.
And I mean, we in and out of the bouncing over ditches and jumping trees and God knows what in it. If the club had seen me, they'd have all had heart attacks.
Yeah.
And we drove it back here, and the wheels were still solid on the axles.
Yeah.
And I've got factory pullers here that I've modified factory pullers, and a sledgehammer. And that was the only way we got them off.
Yeah, yeah.
I've driven through bull dust. I've driven through washouts. I was on a rally down in the back of Wangaratta, and all the cars were lined up on the road, and I saw this dirt track. And I thought, I can get in front of all these cars. I'll be smart.
Yeah.
So I took off. I'm straight up onto this dirt track, and I'm bouncing down someone's driveway towards a property, but it came out about 1.5 kilometres down the road.
Yeah, yeah.
And I'm bouncing out, and I'd been going over water and washouts and off-road, and everybody was horrified when they saw me bounce out. And they said, did you drive that? I said, yeah, why? You'll break it.
It's one of the, from my perspective anyway, having driven old cars that aren't worth anything, one of the problems with classic cars' values going up is all very good because you now have something worth a lot of money. The downside of that is everyone gets very precious about them. and oh, it's going to rain, I'm not taking the Classic out, or dirt road, my goodness, heaven help us for a dirt road. And I think that's a bit of a shame because they're there to be used.
Yeah.
You know.
Well, that one gets used. If it rains, we get wet.
Well,
Just
yeah.
ask Loretta, because when we were out on the rally at Dubbo
Yeah.
in September, October, it was raining and I refused to put the roof up because I was going too slow, and we both got wet.
I think all open-top car owners have that attitude. That even though they might have a roof for it, it's not manly to put it up. I used to have a friend at MGB, and it never went up. It's bloody pouring rain.
Well, I've had people offer to buy it. They reckon it's brand new. It's never been used.
Yeah.
But the thing is, when I first built it, I built it to go in a competition down in the Southern Highlands
Yep.
with the Antique and Classic Motor Club. And I built it especially for that competition. Top paint jobs, top wheels, top upholstery, everything was spot on. And we went down, didn't even get a look in. Some
Yeah.
bloke in some fancy European sports car cleaned it up.
Yeah.
So I said, all right, I know what I'll do. We took it over to the local school, and I had one afternoon, I had about 150 kids climbing in it, blowing the horn,
Yeah.
playing with it. And from that day on, we treated it as a car.
Well, seeing the horn, I just noticed the horn
Honk,
there.
honk.
I was going to say, how is that operated? That's the last question. How is that
Honk,
operated?
honk.
It is a honk honk.
Yep.
Good on you.
It goes, it works. The rubber bulbs, they give out after about 10 or 15,
Yep,
20
yep.
years.
Yeah.
But other than that bulb's been on there for, that was the second one I put on in the 90s.
Right.
And that's been on ever since. And that car, we've driven it in sleet, we've driven it in fog,
Yeah.
and with the semi-trailer behind me, and I don't know how he saw me,
Yeah.
because the lights on the back are not what you'd call fantastic. One little light. I've never lit the side lights up.
Yeah.
They're too polished. I don't want to get them dirty.
Yeah.
The headlights, they run on, they can run on LPG, but they run on calcium carbide gas.
I was going to say that's probably what they ran on back then.
I've got a gas converter for it, and I've got my headlights set up for that. But also, I made an attachment that I can put a normal, about a 32 watt globe in.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I can put it, if I want to run gas, I put it down, and I can run the heat, and it doesn't affect it. If I don't want to run gas, I can put it up, and I've got a headlight globe that'll allow me to see the door there, and that's about it.
Yeah.
And the vibrations, oh my God. That's what you use for a speedo. Each vibration's about 5 kilometres an hour.
So driving this is like those old-fashioned weight reduction.
Oh
things.
yeah, you're vibrating around. But actually it's quite comfortable.
Yeah.
The seats are quite springy and comfortable. You don't really feel a lot of them.
Yeah.
A lot comes through the steering.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I found a 1920s accessory that clips into the steering and takes a lot of the bounce and jump
Right,
out of the
yeah,
steering, so it keeps it reasonably, well, non-bouncing.
Yeah.
But yeah, I don't go. I went fast a couple of times and I thought, that's not worth it.
No.
I normally cruise at around about 40 to 50 kilometres an hour maximum.
Yeah.
Just cruise along.
Well, thank you very much for that chat about this mighty old T-model Ford.
Yeah, well, originally it belonged to my great-grandfather.
Yep.
He bought it brand new from Jones Brothers in Bathurst in 1913.
Well, it's still in the family then.
It hasn't left the family.
Well, that's a good thing too.
And it is sort of an anomaly in it because all the Fords for that time were made in Walkerville in Canada.
Right.
And when you read the radiator, they've all got Ford Motor Company, Walkerville, Ontario.
Right.
But you read the brass plaques on this one,
Yeah.
and the radiator on this one, and it says made by the Ford Motor Company, Ford, Ontario. And Ford, Ontario is a city
Yeah.
about 15 kilometres away from Walkerville,
Right.
which is now part of Walkerville. It's now a suburb.
Yeah.
But that was a separate factory, and they made some cars for export.
Yeah.
This
Yeah.
was an export model.
Right.
Engine number 323.
Well, there you go. All right. Well, I'm Quack McMallard. Bye for now.
Bye bye.